everyone. Okay, so I'm going to be doing a little demo here just to kind of help solidify these concepts that we've been talking about with life drawing. I'm going to be working digitally, which is what I'm not accustomed to. I'm usually working on paper when I'm doing life drawing, so my forms might be a little more loosey-goosey than what you'll see on my paper examples in class. But let's get going. So I am first going to talk about gestures again, and remember that gestures are trying to capture the energy, the motion of the pose. We're not really concerned about being super accurate, being super concerned about perspective. A lot of times you'll see gestures that are really loose. So I'm going to make a new layer here. I have my thing set up, and this is what you'll actually be doing for Project 4 when you're doing your art studies. To get these two pages up at the same time, you go to Window, Workspace, or Arrange, and 2 up vertical. You can also tile all vertically, tile all horizontally, 3 up vertical. I like 2 up vertical better, just because there's, you have limited real estate in terms of space. So the first thing we do, of course, is we find the line of action. So if I were to do this, you would see this kind of line of action. And a lot of times it'll actually extend from like up in her arm, whoops, let me get a darker color here, up in her arm, down, and through. So this is going to be a lot closer to her line of action. So then what I like to do personally is I always like to just put a circle for the head. If I have a lot of time, what I'll do is I'll just throw in a jaw, sometimes a nose, just to kind of solidify what direction she's looking in. And then from there, what I like to do is I like to just imagine where the neck is, go a little further down, and then I kind of measure this rib cage, right? And then I will come over here to the hips. I'm like, what's the angle of the hips? Her hips are going back a little. And then I like to do the legs before I even do the arms. So the cool thing about the legs is there's this muscle in it, or a tendon, I should say. And the top of the thigh always connects to the back of the calf. So you can kind of do something like this. And draw through, find that form underneath. For feet, you just need little triangles at the very least. And then I like to come up here and I like to do the arms. And of course this is all very loose, all very gestural, because that's the point, right? My eyes, for the most part, are all on her. They're not on my drawing so much as they are on her. If I have time, I'll add little other features like the scapula, top of the pelvis, bottom of the rib cage. Sometimes I like to just put the suggestion of hair. We can see the back of the leg muscle here and the kneecap. So if I have a lot of time, like if this is a minute-long gesture, I'll have time to put that in. I'll also have time to kind of come over here and fill out these other limbs a little bit more. Okay. And it doesn't have to be super accurate. Again, this is just for the energy of the pose. I'm taking my time to explain it, but let's try another one. Let's go to Untitled 2 here. So now I'm going to work a little bit more fast and furious now that you kind of know my method. I'm going to look at this. Oops, let me open this a little wider. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to work a little bit more fast and furious now that you know my method. Here's the line of action. Find the angle of the rib cage. Find the angle of the hips. And this is important again once we get into cylinder and box people, which I will be going over as well. And about this time I'd be out of my 30 seconds, right? So that would be pretty much all I have time for. With a minute-long gesture, you have a little bit more time. You can really find this pinch and pull. You can see these parts of her body that fold underneath. So we're going to throw those in. We can see her ribs right here. So we know her bottom of her rib cage is right there. We can see the top of the hip bone here. See how the light kind of bends around it differently? You can define the arm a little better. Put in an elbow. And a little wrist bone. And even with just a minute pose, that's probably about all the time you'd have. But again, we're here to get the energy. We're here to get a feel for what's going on with this figure, not so much what we're doing. So let's actually take a moment, and with the same model, bloop, 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 let's come over here and let's talk about the human being again. So remember, the human being is basically a circle for the torso, an overlapping circle for the hips. This includes the abdominal area, so like here's your abus. And then the chest, of course, those top abs, pectorals. Okay, so that's essentially what we're drawing here. So technically this is like the rib cage, like this, if we're drawing the ribs underneath, right? And then this is the pelvis, but we're simplifying it. So to draw the bean, as a refresher, you have your two overlapping ovals, one representing each, and then on one end you're going to have overlap here, right? And there's going to be a little bit of pinching here that's happening. And then we can draw a center line, which is either down through the sternum, through the middle of the pelvis, or if we're looking at from a back point of view, like if this is someone's back and here's their scapula and stuff, this would be down their spine. Okay? And the human being's a really nice way. It can also fold the other way. So even if I'm drawing this exact same thing, I can have it pinch the other direction too, right? And this changes the perspective of where everything is folding, right? Okay. So it's really important to get a feel for the human being and how it bends, how it contorts, how it can twist. So let's take a look at her. And let's look at the angle of her torso here. So her torso is doing this. It's a little straighter than that. And then let's look at the hips. Her hips are really angled, right? Because she's sitting in this weird sort of position. So this is going to be her bean. So now I'm going to come up top. I'm going to go over it again. And now I have a question. I know this is where it pinches. I can see the pinches right here on her body. But now I have the question, what form is overlapping which? And this is where you kind of have to be logical about it. So we have to decide, okay, is her shoulder closer to me, or her hips closer to me, or her knees closer to me? What is twisting and pulling her pose? Well, if we look at this, she's pulling her knees in the opposite direction, and her shoulder, because we can see the top of this here. So if this over here was a cylinder, right? This is what we'd be seeing. And because we can see her rear here, we know this is going back in space, right? So this means this is coming towards us, this is not. So over here, this is the way it's going to pinch, right? Now we can take a look at where the center line goes. And the center line goes down the middle of her sternum. And this kind of folds over, right? So this is how we show that there's a twist. Okay? Okay, so let's expand upon this. I'll do another bean for this person. I'm going to actually start in a lighter green this time. So let's look at her back and her hips. So she has kind of this, if I was to draw a line of action going through her, and remember, a line of action is always curved. We can also say it does kind of this. Okay? but then her hips are sticking back out, so her body's doing this. So now we can come back through and we can kind of redefine this being a little better. We know the pinch is here. We can see where it comes in here and how it stretches right here. Okay. And now we have to use that logic again, which is sticking out closer to us. Well, she's leaning back, but her rear is going to be sticking out, right? Because we're actually seeing up into her rib cage and up underneath here, right? If we look at it this way, we can kind of really see which one comes back a little further, right? So it's going to pinch like this. And now let's look at the spine, okay? So this is going to be our center or back line. It's going to do that. And I make it bump right here because there's the fold right there, okay? All right, excellent. I'm running out of room. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here now. Turn this layer off, make a new layer. And now let's talk about cylinder form since I'm starting to draw it over here. So let's find that line of action again. And we always start with a gesture. Always, always, always. You always want to push the pose. And pushing the pose just means you exaggerate it a little bit to get something that's a lot more energetic and a lot more accurate. A lot of times you think, oh, don't push the pose, then it's going to look too extreme. But a lot of times when we're drawing, we never push enough, right? Okay, so here's my gesture, right? Now I can come in and I can start filling in this information with spheres and cylinders, right? And because I know the human being, I kind of know where things are going to overlap, right? So here's the cylinder for her torso. It's actually tilting a little bit more this way. And here's the cylinder for her hips. Just gonna... If we were to draw the skin on top of it, this is where it would pinch because it's the skin that's pinching. Okay, just as a note. Now we can just keep coming in and we can ask ourselves, okay, let's look at this leg here. What leg is this direction going? Well, I think it's going away from us, right? This part right here is closer than the knee. So obviously it's going to be going this direction, right? And I can put a little socket for the kneecap. Fill that in. I am going to draw just a little line here because the hips are in front of the leg in this case. So let's look at this. What is it coming towards us or away from us once it nears the bottom? It's coming towards us. So we can put the little dark part at the bottom instead of the top. Draw a cylinder. I like to make it bow out just a little bit because there's a calf muscle there, and it's kind of good practice just to get used to recognizing there's muscles there. You can do the same for the top here. You can add a little roundness to the top of the thigh. And then I just like to draw super easy little triangles, sort of triangle shaped feet. Okay, so let's do the same thing with this other one. This one's a little trickier because it's straight, but let's take a good look at this, okay? So here's the leg. If I'm going to turn this into a cylinder, it's going to curve down a little bit, right? You can still see a little bit. It wouldn't be quite as stark as this leg, but it would still be the top-down cylinder. Because our eye line right here, it's about right here. So remember that horizon line? Our line's right here, and anything below it, we'll see the top of. See, perspective's all coming back. Okay. Same thing with this one. It's not coming back towards us per se. It's not angled back towards us, so we're going to see the top of it. A little ankle bone. And a little triangle foot. Okay, so let's come up here to the arms now. And let's look at what direction this is coming in. The elbow's coming towards us, right? So let's draw the elbow here. This is coming towards us a little bit, so it's going to be doing this. Put a little socket there too for the shoulder if you want. I find sometimes these are really helpful, especially if the shoulder bulges out like it does here, just for placing the arms. Sometimes too, what I do is I actually draw both ends of the cylinder before deciding which direction it's coming in. Sometimes it's just easier to find the form than it is to decide what direction it's going in. So there we go. This one's obviously going away from us. Okay, and what I like to do too with these is I still like to add the center line down the back, just so we get some practice recognizing. Now, I've mentioned contours in class before, and just remember contours kind of just accentuate what direction things are going in and how strongly. So this contour would be pretty strong, right? Because it's receding from us. This one is going to be a lot more straight. So this just really helps us to further define the form. And when we're working with human bodies, we can do contours here too, but then it gets a lot more complicated, right? Because now we're contouring around muscle. So if we learn how to contour around simple shapes, this makes contouring around muscle a lot easier, right? Okay, so let's move on and let's do a box figure now, okay? Okay, let me pull a couple over here. Okay, I like this one. It has some pretty good lighting. Yeah, this one's better. Okay, so let's draw our gesture first. And this one actually might have two, not gestures, I'm sorry, line of action. This one might have two line of actions. I kind of see this going on with the arms. And then this with the body. Okay. And when you're drawing these ovals for the chest and for the hips, try and make this proportional to your head. So his chest is like this, right? It's pretty wide because he's kind of a muscular man. And then his hips are narrower. In general, men's hips are much narrower than women's, and then women's shoulders are not as broad. Okay. I'm relating the top of the thigh muscle down through the calf to the ground. Okay. Same thing here. What you can do in class too, it's a lot harder to do digitally, is you can hold your pen out and measure this distance, and keeping your elbow locked, you can measure that same distance like this to help get an angle. That's really tricky. So here I am putting in shoulder muscles just because his arms are so big, and his shoulders kind of stick out a little bit. So for my gesture even, I like to do that. Because his arm really doesn't start until past the shoulder here. Okay, cool. So now I got this kind of workable figure. We got a twist going on, so maybe before starting even, it would help just to find that center line. Okay, so let's go through and let's turn them into a box figure. Okay, so that head's kind of a fancy head. You don't have to do anything like that. You can just have a box like this would work just fine. Now we're going to look at the angle of his torso. We can't see on top of it really, so we know we're going to be seeing underneath it. So let's draw just a square. And now, taking the depth, we can connect these just like this, right? And this can even come down a little bit more. Same thing, we have to decide here, can we see the top or the bottom of the hips? He's angled kind of downwards, so it's going to be a pretty tricky one. His angles are also turned from us, so this front plane that we drew here, like this is his front plane here, remember it's twisting. So we're seeing something that's pretty much from the side here. Okay, and then what I like to do is I like to match the corners. So we know this corner correlates with this one. So I'll just draw a little line here. Same thing from here to here. And here to here. And this one would connect to the invisible one in the back here, so I'm not going to bother drawing it. But this really helps to define this twist a little bit better. Right? Okay, now we can come to his arm, and we can, I didn't do the best gesture for that, so I can see the angle's wrong, I'm going to fix it. You'll do this a lot when you're working too, is you'll notice something's not quite right, and then you'll fix it. So let's see here, if we're breaking this down into a box, it's going to be something like this, right? So let's just decide the top of the arm is the top plane, and then we can do this. There we go. Okay. Okay. So there's that. Here's this other part of the arm. There's this kind of invisible elbow right here. If you want, you can put a sphere there if that helps. Totally not necessary though. And then we'll just make a little box for the hand. Right? Now we can come over here and do the same thing. We can look at the angle of this and we can decide, okay, here's our rectangle. Find the top plane. Break this down into planes. So like the front of the arm has a plane, side of the arm has another plane, another plane. So here we're seeing a side and the top, right? So that's why I was drawing it like this. I think I like this better. There we go. Same thing here. We're looking at the bottom of the arm and the side of the arm, so we have to have those two sides, right? And then we'll have the hand. We see the tops of the fingers, side of the hand. These are really tricky. If you just want to draw a normal box, you can totally do that too. I will not hold that against anyone. Okay, so let's come down here and let's look at the leg. So remember, the leg sticks out before it goes down from the side view. It's kind of hard to see that though. So again, let's break this down. If the front of our leg here, this is the front plane, this is the side plane, we can see the front plane here as well as part of the side plane. Okay, and his thigh is really thick, which is why this cube is so blocky. Put in a patella. Same thing here. Now this is something I like to do with these calves when calves are involved. This is kind of an extreme showing, just so I want you guys to be able to see it. So a lot of times I'll just add on this little extra section. If I didn't have it on, it would just be this right here. But I'm going to stick it all on just to show that there's a calf muscle there. And then just triangle feet. Same thing here. So this one's a little trickier because this one's receding away from us, right? So let's actually draw inside first. We're going to draw through, just so this is a little easier to draw in perspective, right? And a kneecap. Same thing here. We're actually going to be seeing what's underneath here, right? Here's the front of the leg, side and back, other side. And I'm going to have that heel come off just a little bit. So now this is my box form. Box forms are a little more complicated than sphere forms, just because we have a little bit more perspective to think in, but they're actually really, really handy. As tricky as they can be, they're quite handy. Okay, there it goes. Sorry, my thing was lagging a little bit. So I'm just going to go over this in black real quick to make it really easy to see here. And to see what parts overlap which other parts. And here I'm not doing realistic shading. Normally you would actually look at your model and you would say, okay, where's the light hitting on this part? And then you would shade that particular side. Here I'm doing it just to differentiate the different parts of these cube forms. Okay, and as far as these lines go, I put them in, but I don't color through them. I leave them kind of transparent so you can see something going through them. So like if we had a cloud here, we'd see right through him, but not through the rest of him. And again, that's just because we're focusing on the angle of the hips more than we are anything else. And this is something that definitely gets easier the more you do it. It's kind of a weird concept at first, but it's actually kind of fun. This is, if you're really into Transformers or anything like that, this is a really good tool to practice to kind of draw those robots. I personally love Transformers. I'm not like the biggest fan, but you know, Decepticons all the way and all that jazz. Okay, so here's my finished attempt at a box person. Yay! All right, so let's do one more. Yeah, this one's good. Okay, so again, I'm gonna start, oof, that's hard to see. Okay, I'm gonna start with a gesture. This kind of energy's moving like this, I think. It could also be moving down like this with his other leg. It's totally up to you how you want to represent it. But you do need to kind of make that energy travel all through his whole body. So I'm going to find his rib cage, angle of his hips, something like that. I'm going to do this leg first just because this is the one that's grounded. I'm going to come over here. This leg kind of comes back. All right, so there's a beautiful gesture. So I'm also going to find the center line down his spine here, just to kind of help me. Okay, there we go. Okay. So now let's go over him and sketch in some boxes. So remember, if we're doing a cylinder, it's a little easier to figure out where he's going, right? What we can see down. Same thing here. So from the cylinder, if you want to try this first, especially for the rib cage and hips, starting with the cylinder is actually really great. And then we can say, okay, I can see part of his side here. So here's going to be a line. And this is going to be a line. It's going to connect up. Here's a line. Here's a line. Here's a line. This has to come down to match this. And there's a line. Voila, we have a box for his back. Same thing here with the cylinder. If boxes are hard to draw right off the bat, start with the cylinder and decide, okay, I can see a little bit of the side of his hip here. It's mostly the back, right? This is going to come up along the sides of the cylinder. We're going to match these two lines, and then we're going to connect them. Voila! Magic! And now we can connect these lines down, right? And we can see a little bit of bulge right here. So that's why this is bulging a little bit. It's where it's pinching in reality and creating these folds, but there's a bulge. Pinching's kind of a little bit of a misnomer because a lot of times you just think, oh, if it pinches, there's nothing there. But no, there's always a little fold. Okay, so let's keep doing this. His shoulder comes out quite a bit. So let's, again, start with the cylinder and come down. Okay, and now let's ask, what parts of the arm do we see? Well, we see mostly the top, but we see a little bit of the side of the arm, right? So let's draw a line down for the side of the arm. Let's put a line here at the bottom, the base of that cylinder circle. Same thing here. Voila. We have a beautiful, beautiful box. Put an elbow. Same thing here. Are we seeing this way? Or are we seeing it this way? Again, this is kind of hard because we're working with 2D pictures, so we have a lot of logical guesswork. I would venture to say this one's kind of tricky because with a live model you can clearly see it. With a 2D picture you lose that third dimension. so it makes it a little trickier. But let's say it's one of these. It's coming back just a smidge. Okay, and now we can ask ourselves that wonderful question, what part of the arm can we see? Well, the wrist bone's right here, and the wrist bone falls on the side of the arm. And this is obscured in shadow, but here's his other side of the arm, right? So we can say, okay, let's have this part be the side of the arm. We'll turn this into the top of the square and have it come down. We'll just angle off that bottom. Okay. And we'll just draw an expression for the hand here. Make it come down at an angle there, just so it fits in. Okay, so same thing with his head. We can see the back of his head right here. Here's that mark of anatomy at the occipital lobe. And this tells us it's the back of his head, his neck. If his head's kind of this diamond shape. There we go. You can make your head whatever shape you want. He's kind of a diamond head. All right, so let's continue doing the same thing here. Let's start with the cylinder because the cylinder is really easy, right? You guys are all cylinder pros at this point. Let's decide, okay, what part of the arm do we see? Well, we see the top and we see this side, right? So let's add a little line. Angle this off. Angle this off. Add a joint. Okay, and this one we can definitely tell is coming towards us, right? Let's do that. And this one's pretty straight on, right? So what we're actually going to do is just kind of straighten out this front part here. Okay, and now we'll just add in another series of hands here. Just kind of simplifying that. All right, down to the legs. Okay, so let's look at this left leg here. Do we see the top or the bottom? Well, let's go back to our cylinder. This makes it really easy, right? All right, so what sides do we see? We see part of the side and part of the back. Angle this off, angle this off. And these lines follow the cylinder, remember? Okay. Add a kneecap if that helps you. Same thing here, what direction does it go? Kind of goes this way, but it comes up at an angle. Okay, and we definitely see a lot of the side and a lot of the top. And then it's coming towards us. Angle this off. And then if we want, let's bring this up a little. Add a calf muscle here. Okay. Same thing with his feet. It's basically just a triangle. The toes are coming in, right? And then we see the back of his foot, so we can just kind of cut this in half and add some shading there. All right, last leg. Again, asking myself, what sides of the leg do I see? I see part of the top. And you can tell because there's this muscle right here that comes around the top. I see the top, I see the side. This one I'm more eyeballing because I know it's coming down just a smidge towards us. Ever so slightly. Alright, so here is our box man. Also remember, put in a line for the spine and where it goes down the tailbone. Okay, so this is the method. I think in doing this, starting with the cylinders, even on a box form, can be really helpful. It makes things a little bit easier. So just to finish up, let's talk about shading when we're shading these forms, okay? Because what we're doing is we're looking at the shadows here. We're looking at where they land, and we know they land on this side, right? So that means our lighting's coming down from up here, way off the screen, right? So that means this will be darkest on the rightmost side. Anything that's slightly downward angled will have a lighter side, and then the point that's heading towards the light source will be the lightest. So let me just do this for a few forms here. And this is a really simplistic way of starting to figure out this sort of complex lighting on really complex forms without getting totally overwhelmed, right? And then you can even be like, okay, well, I see some gradual gradation here. You can just do this. Little gradual gradation. Okay? And it's not just for this part. Then we come down here to the leg. Let's really look at this. Look how dark this leg is. So I'm going to go over this a few more times, just because the entire thing's really dark, right? Same thing with the calf here. Right? Ironically, the foot here, this is the dark side. Let's look at lighting on this leg. This is kind of a mid-tone, right? Because this is our highlight color, and then this is all dark. Same thing here with this calf. It's kind of dark where it connects right here. See how dark this line is? And this is kind of a mid-tony color. And then this is kind of light with a slight gradation coming down. Same thing with his foot right here. Okay. Let's come in here with the shoulder. Okay. So this side, the side that's pointing right here, is much lighter than the rest of the arm, right? So let's bring in a mid-tone here. And let's look over here. It's really dark under this wrist. And then it's really dark right here. And then this is mostly dark. Till we get about right there, right? It darkens up again. All right, so here's our finished guy. I'm gonna come in here and make this up a little bit. So yeah, there we go. So that would be how you would add shading to these sorts of forms. And you can really go over it a few times if you're not really happy with the results. Be like, this is a little too dark for this, or maybe there isn't enough contrast here, enough differentiation. You can really go through and just go nuts. Okay, so that's it for this video lecture. I hope this helps clear up some issues about the form. I will be doing another one of these when we get into muscles and skeletons, and we start expanding upon what we know and starting to draw the entire form, not just the building blocks. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now.